Hey everyone, I'm Rather Incoherent, and I'll be posting this video live a few hours before Festival of Legend launches on the 11th, and I'm going to be talking about all the decks that I've already theory crafted about, a lot really thought about, and I have a good amount of confidence going into the expansion, and I want to test all of them out. It's going to be at least one for each class and 14 decks total. I'm just going to be going through them in alphabetical order and talking about what's in each of them, and I will mention there are decks that are absolutely good that I'm not going to be talking about today. You'll notice there's no Frost Death Knight here despite that being a tier 1 deck that lost nothing. That's not because I don't think Frost will do well, it's just because it's not a new deck, so I'm not particularly interested. Getting into the Deathrattle Unholy deck, this is the variant of Unholy where you build around Bone Shredder. You cut all of your Death Rattles that don't give you board presence to focus on repeating things that matter like Death Rattles from Foul Egg and Nerubian Egg, and then you care more about enablers like Rowdy Fan, whereas if you had something like the Hawk Shredder Rancher, you'd have to play the curve very differently. You'd play Rancher to enable the eggs, whereas this lets you play the eggs initially and then threaten a big enable later. Because of the focus on Death Rattles, this deck will be better if you're losing on board than the current Unholy Death Knight stuff, and that makes me like it a little bit more. It also is the deck where you just sort of curve out into Cagehead. Because we're spending all of our corpses on Bone Shredders, we can't really reliably trigger a Marogar. Deck probably is still better with Marogar, I'm going to be honest with you. But for the first few iterations, I'll be trying just curving out into Cagehead and seeing how that feels, because again, unlike Old Unholy, we've moved Contract Quarter back in to trigger these eggs. I really like the look and feel of this deck. It kind of reminds me of Naxxramas era Zoo decks, and it looks really solid. I don't know if it'll be top tier, I kind of doubt it, but it'll definitely be very viable and I'm interested in seeing just how well it does. Then we come down to Cagehead Combo where we throw Caution to the Wind and we build entirely around Cagehead. In this deck we still run Bone Shredders, but they're duplicating literally nothing but draw. We run Loot Hoarders, Thalnos, and Shellfallen Baron. We're also going to be running Famished Fool. Our goal is to draw our deck as quickly as possible, and our objective is to hit Bone Lord Frost Whisper, put a clock on ourselves and the opponent by triggering this Death Rattle, and what we're going to do with it is play a 0-mana Cagehead, several other minions, Death Rattle their effects onto those minions, kill those minions with Contract Quarters or with trades if someone left them on the board. Realistically, we can use our hero power for one and Contract Quarter the other, so it shouldn't be too hard to get some combination of minions on the board, killed with Death Rattle, and kill our opponent. The real question is, seeing as this isn't really a control deck, we have no control tools and a shit curve, can we survive long enough to do this? Does our hero power, our limited removal, our early curve, frail though it may be, actually get us to our objective? My gut feeling is no. This is the best Cagehead combo deck I've found so far, and it still looks terrible, but I'm going to give it a shot and see how it does. This deck is currently missing 2 cards. The 2 cards that are missing, as you can see up here, are Rowdy Fans. This is my Naga Face Hunter deck. It's the Hunter deck I have the most confidence in. It's pretty straightforward. You play the best cards available to you to curve out. You use things like Aerosmith to try to push face damage, Rajnajan to try to push face damage, Ancient Krakenbane to the face. And Jungle Jammers are at their best, like all Hunter weapons, when being swung at the face. You've also got really strong 4, 5, and 6 drops, if not many of them. So this is your traditional Face Hunter, a lot of premium early game stuff with a lot of targetable abilities going straight to the face. Our 1-drops are pretty premium. Barrel of Monkeys, especially in conjunction with Bananas, can serve very well in board-centric matchups. And honestly, I'm kind of scared of this. I don't think it's quite there. The card quality feels a little bit low. You have cards like Wild Spears that feel a little bit too slow, and there's not really competitive options. But on the whole, scary deck. I'm interested in seeing how it does. When it comes to Miracle Rogue, I don't think the newer stuff is the better stuff. I think if you're looking at anything involving Record Scratcher and Rhyme Spinner, those cards don't really work well with the pre-existing Miracle Rogue stuff. You need more combos, more cuts, and there's not really room to fit everything you want in the combo deck. Additionally, Record Spinner is at odds with Necrolord Draka because if you refresh your mana crystal by attacking to have this big turn for a big dagger, you equip it but you can't swing with it because you already swung the Record Scratcher. So I think the combo Miracle stuff is not really that viable. Additionally, I think Freebird Miracle is dead in the water because Freebird just cost 4 mana, and Rogue doesn't have the anti-aggro or control tools to survive long enough to kill you with Freebirds. Traditional Miracle Rogue, like we were saying at the end of March of the Lich King, however, should be just fine. They're losing valuable tools, but they're also getting powerful new tools in Elven Minstrel in particular, and this deck is basically just how many Astalors can you play, or barring that, how many Queen Asharas can we play? Because the main reason I think Bounce Around is actually a good card is the potential to play multiple Astalors in one turn. There are multiple ways you can do this. You can play Astalor 8, Shadow Step it on that turn, and next turn you play Astalor for 6, Bounce Around for 3, Astalor for 1, totaling 10. Or you can play Astalor, Prep, Bounce Around, Astalor, just explode in one turn without any warning. And then additionally, we just have more ways to bounce things. We have the breakdance, we have so much ability to bounce that Astalor or Queen of Sharp or fighting for board in a tempo matchup. I think this is a fairly intuitive way to continue from where old Miracle Rogue left off, and it looks like it's going to stay in tier 1 right where it left. Post the Theorycraft, the Demon Hunter I'm most interested in is the Outcast Demon Hunter, but I do look at it and feel anxious. It can just generate borderline infinite value with stuff like Wretched Exile and all the Outcast cards in the deck, and Glaivatar gives it huge draw, and it's got a good early curve, so essentially the idea is beat your opponent down, generate resources, keep beating them down, eventually they'll die, right? As far as game plans go, when you have to be vague, it's usually because there isn't much of one. There's not a clear way you kill your opponent here. The best we've got is using Helvaria Darkraven in conjunction with something like Security to buff up our board as a pseudo Bloodlust. It's alright. I think the deck is generally made of a lot of valuable tools, and I think if it had a clear win condition, other than just beat your opponent down when we don't have any premium curve minions really, I definitely think this deck's going to do well. I'm just very hesitant about it, and generally that's just how I feel about Demon Hunter, and that might be partially reflective of my own inexperience with the class, as I largely haven't played the game since it came out. I think I've got like 50 games on Demon Hunter. Coming over to pure Bubble Paladin, I don't have a Kangor list. I believe Kangor is too vulnerable to silence and too core to the deck and too build around, so if Kangor ends up being good, or even prominent despite its quality, it will just be countered by everyone running tradable silence or silence inside of an ETC, and the deck will not do well as a result. Pure Paladin with the bubble support that it got, I think is going to be very, very strong. The main thing it gets is actually not in its curve going down. Like, yes, you do threaten Righteous Protector into 2-mana 5/5 with Spotlight, and that's very scary, but I think the biggest thing this deck actually improves is when you come back down the curve off of Order in the Court. On your 5 drops, you hit Lothraxi and then Redeemed, probably able to be played on the same turn as a Curator for a really strong turn 10. And then you hit into Jitterbugs, Muster for Battle, and Funkfen, so you're summoning a lot of guys with Divine Shield at once and threatening huge amounts of draw and damage off of them, and I think that's going to cause you to have a lot more longevity in your Pure Paladin when you're coming back down the curve. It also just makes you more dangerous without this stuff, and additionally, if you miss Order in the Court, the Curator gets a lot better. You've added Demons and Murlocs to the list. We've also added one more beast, so if you draw a Light Ray, it's not just a lost draw on Curator. So generally speaking, the Curator gets better, the come down curve gets better, going normally through the game the first time around stays about the same. I think Pure Paladin's going to be very, very strong, and this is the current Theorycraft I've got for it. Next up, we have Hero Power Ramp Druid. The Groovy Cat, Peaceful Piper, and Free Spirit package is very, very strong, and if your plan is to turn your Hero Power into essentially 2 mana, draw a shield block, play it, draw a Fireball off of it, and cast Fireball, that's an insane Hero Power. If you're able to get to the late game and cast that every turn, you will win, pretty much guaranteed. However, Druid lost a lot of its ability to stabilize, so much of this deck is built around how do we stabilize in the late game with cards like Miracle Growth, Anubra Khan, Underking, Zok Fogsnout, and Ziliax. These are the stabilization tools available to us, and that's not great. You might need to run this as a Renathal list, where you add in like Wrath and Lunar Eclipse. But first, I'm going to try it like this, because I genuinely hate running Renathal. However, running Renathal isn't as bad when you have things hard tutoring the most important cards in the deck, but still, I really don't want to run Renathal unless I have to, but I can see Renathal being the best version of this deck due to its problems with aggro and the lack of card slots to fit every anti-aggro tool it wants into the deck. But the concept, ramp up, get a crazy hero power, beat your opponent to death, find a way to stabilize, really, really good. In addition, we have cards like Spread the Word for draw, Summer Flower Child to tutor our endgame, Timber Tambourine, as well as Rhythm and Roots to spam out big boards over and over again to keep our opponent busy and not beating us to death. And it's a very threatening deck. I'm very interested in seeing how it does like this, and if this fails, then I will be transitioning over to Renathal ramp and seeing how that does. For Priest, none of the Control Priest stuff is really appealing to me, and Undead Priest, I've basically seen what it was. It doesn't change very much, so I'm not interested in playing it immediately. TempOverheal Priest is something I'm actually scared of. Does look genuinely terrifying. You have a curve including a lot of early game. You have 1, 2, 3, 4 1-drops, because you can play all of these on 1 and they are all strong tempo plays. You have some of the best premium tempo removal in the game. Dreamboat's really more of an enabler like Fan Club. I mean, it is Fan Club, right? It's Fan Club on a stick, and the bigger it Fan Clubs, the bigger the stick gets. But we still have other 2-drops. You have a good number of 2-drops as well. Holy Champion, Injured Tol'Vir, Mana Geode. Power Chord Synchronize is a small buff. It allows us to get some tools if we need them. mostly I imagine we're doing this to duplicate a Crimson Clergy when we're low on resources. But it seems like it fits the deck. I'm not sure if this should be here, but I'm interested in trying it out. Cathedral of Atonement makes a ton of sense. We're an aggro deck, we want the bust, we want the card draw, done deal. Heartthrob's the biggest payoff for Overheal there is, and then we have Sunfury Clergy and Cannibalize just to trigger our entire board at once. In addition, removing your opponent's taunts is the easiest way to get through them, so let's just do that. Heartbreaker Adonis, I'm going to try him out. I'm not convinced he's the best. I'm not running Flash Heal, so the only other way to trigger him immediately is to Fan Club and heal with your hero power. And that's fine, right? Like, realistically, if Heartbreaker Adonis comes down on 4, a lot of the time you will have a Fan Club and an Idol's Adoration already in play waiting for him, and you'll know he's coming, so you won't be using them before then. I do think it's possible to play him and trigger him on 4 and just win the game on the spot, and I'm interested in seeing how he does. I can definitely see him being weak or insane. I need to play a lot of games with him before I have an opinion, unlike Pazik. If I have both in my hand, I'm playing Pazik first every time. Pazik is just a backbreaking card. If you're playing an aggro deck and you're not running Pazik, you probably need to figure out what card you can cut for Pazik, because this guy is just insane. He's a 4-mana 5/4, and if your opponent kills him, it gets worse. The only play your opponent's allowed to make when they see Pazik is they spend 3 mana playing a vanilla 3/3 and they lose the game. That's an exaggeration, but he's still incredibly strong and he fits in every aggro deck very easily. Coming over to Mage, I have 3 different Mage decks and I'm all very interested in. I'm about to make myself not record 3 consecutive Mage videos because I really wanted to start out by playing all of these. And I want to show off Amalgam Mechs first because it shows off a concept that Amalgams sneak into every Trigal archetype. Originally, this was just a Mech deck. My Shaman deck was originally just a Totem deck. But then I realized I'm already running Amalgam with a Deep. Mistake fits very nicely into the deck. Like, the best thing in Amalgam Warrior is that Mistake is a magnetizable 1-drop. Like, Mistake into Bronze Gatekeeper is terrifying, and that fits here as well. So if I can get Mistake in, then I can probably just run 1 Amalgam Band. There's enough going on, right? I've got a couple of Mech Beast in this, and in Gorilla Bot and in Mech Shark. I've got 4 Amalgams. And once I have 5 Amalgams, you can just run Gorlock Ravager for more steam. It fits in nicely. And yeah, I think that the Amalgam package, it's not strong enough to be played literally everywhere. But it is strong enough that the moment you take on 1 tribe, you probably have to look at the entire Amalgam package afterwards. Now, this is going to be the deck I play first, because I also think this stands a chance of being a legitimate tier 1 threat, and the big reason for that is volume up. The scariest thing in this expansion for me is the idea of a mage with a really strong curve playing volume up to draw nothing but burn spells, duplicate them, and just kill me at the end of that curve. To that end, Mech Mage was the best curve Mage had. I think Amalgam Mech is actually better, as well as having more longevity because of things like Gorlock and Amalgam Band. And then we can use volume up to duplicate Fireball and Frozen Touch. And nothing else. We don't even have, we have 6 spells total. It's just Frozen Touch, Fireball, and Volume Up, because the only thing these spells need to do is go face, and I don't need many of them, I just need the good ones. So yeah, I'm terrified of this. I think this could be a tier 1 menace candidate for nerfs, and it would be unsurprising to me if the target for those nerfs was Volume Up, and of course Pozik's here, he could get nerfed too, because I mean, yeah, why wouldn't he be? Did you hear me when I was talking about TempOverheal Priest? Coming over to a much more normal speed of Mage, we have Rommath's Lightshow. This is a deck all about using Lightshow, finding ways to duplicate it, and then casting several consecutive Lightshows at the end of your curve with the Grand Magister Rommath to finish them off. Additionally, they might be able to be killed just by casting Lightshows in hand. We have stuff like Aegwynn, Silvermoon Arcanist, and the second Silvermoon Arcanist in here. The reason I have my second Silvermoon Arcanist inside of ETC is that very frequently I won't need 2 of these. Likewise, I feel like every deck probably wants ETC Coroner until I know that Kangor's not on the field, and Talon Fordran inside of ETC, to me, is just better than running Talon, because again, if I have drawn Grand Magister Rommath, I probably don't want Talon at all. What I pick here is not a tech choice, it's not a Swiss Army knife like it is sometimes. There is a tech card in here, but it's really, do I need Silvermoon Arcanist with my current hand? Do I need to draw my endgame with my current hand? It's not about what my opponent's doing, it's about what I'm doing. And this, again, looks like a very strong deck. We've got Volume Up duplicating Lightshows, Photographer Fizzle, in particular synergizes with that. I think this is usually a value card that's not that good, unless we're talking about Mage. In Mage, you take a picture of your hand, it turns into a snapshot, which is a spell, and if you run a low spell deck, Volume Up soft tutors that out of your deck. There's a chance I should be running Fizzle inside of that Amalgam Mech Mage I just talked about, but I don't want to think about that right now. Anyway, Rommath's Lightshow is a much cooler, equally terrifying deck. And lastly, we have DJ Manastorm OTK. When I was reviewing Manastorm, I talked at length about how all the big spells had rotated right when he came in, so he didn't really have a home, forgetting that Pyroblast was in the core set, so his home is hitting you with 3 consecutive Pyroblasts to guarantee a kill. And you can do that potentially much earlier with a Bone Lord Frost Whisper. We have ways of duplicating Pyroblast with Volume Up, with the Rewind. So yeah, terrifying deck concept. Don't know if it's actually going to be great, but it's definitely interesting. I don't think it's good as the other 2 mages, but it's really, really cool, and I'm looking forward to playing some of it. It also has some hot tech with things like Hollow Technician Shooting Star. It's the one deck I'm running with Mage that actually has a good home for Arcane Artificer, which is a very, very cool card. And theoretically, you could win games with like Astalor and Queen Ashara, but that's boring. Play Pyroblast 3 times, maybe 4, it'll be funny. Then we come over to Amalgam Totem Shaman, and again, the one Amalgam band snuck in right at the end. I was like, oh, wait a second, this is probably worth doing. I'm already running Amalgam in the deep, and mistake, like I'm running the whole package. So I need to get Gorlocks in here, I need to get the one Amalgam band in here. Once I have all these Amalgams, I probably should have already been running Zilliax. I have no defensive cards whatsoever in this deck, and I could be behind on board. It could be tremendously helpful, it could save my life. And I ended up cutting Bloodlust from the package, instead relying more on just taking board and fighting from board to win, because realistically, as often as Bloodlust will win you the game by giving you lethal, it will lose you the game by breaking your hand. That's been my experience every single meta I've played Shaman in, so I don't mind doing this. Unlike the other ones, however, because Rotgill's in this deck, there actually are other Murlocs, not just the Amalgams or your Warlocks to hit, so I think Clownfish, just as a good tempo card, probably ends up being worth running. I can see this easily being cut for Bloodlust and a Refined List. I can see things changing a lot, but you have the really strong Amalgam package synergizing with the return of Grand Totem Eyesore and a Thing from Below. Previously, Gigantotem and Rotgill were almost enough to get Totem Shaman into viability, and with all the new stuff coming into this deck, I think this is actually, again, a very strong deck. I don't know if it's anywhere near the threat level of Amalgam Mech Mage, but Amalgam Totem Shaman's looking pretty legit. This is the hot garbage Warlock that I love and can't convince myself not to play. It's just your standard run-of-the-mill, I'm going to make myself invincible and Mal'Ganis invincible and win the game deck, and the entire deck is just stalling until that point. People could try to disrupt you, but they can't dirty rat you if you dirty rat their dirty rat first. Likewise, they can't Theatar you if you Theatar their Theatar, and that's essentially the whole deck. You're trying to control the board, so we have Armor Vendors, Mortal Coils, Blood Mage Thalnos, Defile, Drain Soul, Hellfire. We have even Opera Solace, we're just running it all. We're running every single control tool available to us. We're running more Draw to find them faster, Zola to duplicate our dirty rats to keep trying to rip the disruption out of their hand. And of course, all that disruption isn't just to protect us from their disruption. It's because the main thing I'm afraid of dying to is a combo deck getting in under Mal'Ganis Jailer, and disrupting that combo keeps me alive. I think this is a really interesting deck. Normally, I would not be running a Royal Librarian, this would just be a second tour guide. But if we come into the ETC, you'll see I have my second Silence and Corner, a Photographer Fizzle, and Siphon Soul. Fizzle actually really needs to be in there. Again, this is a thing that's very relevant to what matchup you're in. He's not normally worth being in the deck, but if you play Jailer, you can play Fizzle Zola literally forever, and you'll just turn off Fatigue. You won't take Fatigue damage that turn. You'll put 2 minions on the board. You'll have invested effectively nothing. You have 5 mana left. And this is relevant because if you do this before playing Mal'Ganis, even against something like Blood Death Knight, you're just not afraid. Because they can keep clearing Mal'Ganis with Soul Stealers 3, 4 times. I don't care how many times you discovered it. I'll slowly but surely keep duplicating Mal'Ganis until you can't get him off the board. Which is the reason that's in there. It's pretty much exclusively for the Blood Death Knight matchup, and it's just not a good enough card to main deck at all. You'll notice I don't have Symphony of Souls in here. Realistically, it should be Siphon Soul, but I can't put it in the deck right now, so I haven't been able to change it. I will remove this just as a reminder for myself that it's not supposed to be Siphon Soul. But the reason I don't think Symphony of Sins is worth main decking is because it has nothing to do with your win conditions. I would only ever be taking Symphony of Souls out of ETC if I was against a combo deck, and I felt like it's disrupt or die with ETC in hand. Last up, we have Big Menagerie. And the tier list that went live yesterday, recorded over a week ago for me as I record this video, I said Black Rock and Roll is probably the worst legendary in the set, at least it's one of the worst ones. I'm not 100% convinced I'm wrong. Here's the thing, I just sort of forgot about Trench Stalker when I said that, and Decimator Ulgra. I was viewing it as like, oh yeah, you can use Lorthamar and Black Rock and Roll, and then maybe you double up Remornia, you just have big boards, who cares? But there's actually 4 different minions that come out of your hand with doubled stats and hit your opponent directly in the face. That's a win condition. And with just Black Rock and Roll, it wouldn't be good enough. With just Lord of Arthur like we had previously, there's not enough consistency to the strategy. But now, with both of them, you can reliably hit one of them, hit something with your doubling stats, and that's just sort of disgusting. It's kind of incredible. So the only question then is, can we build a deck that's going to reliably get there? And that's where Menagerie comes in. It's pretty much all Warrior has going for it, but the Menagerie curve is pretty solid. Roaring Applause is one of the best draw cards in the entire format. And yeah, I think that realistically, you can build a Warrior deck that curves out, keeps its theme going with Roaring Applause and Gorlock Ravagers, plays stat doubling effects, and then hits your opponent in face to steal the game with like a 34 attack Trench Stalker. Why not? I think it's a cohesive, functional game plan, and I don't think Warrior is doomed. I still don't think Black Rock and Roll is good. I think it's one of the best things Warrior's got, and I think that's a dismal state of affairs, but I'm interested in seeing if it'll work. And as I said earlier, these are far from the only decks I think are going to be good. They're just the decks most interesting for me that I'm going to be trying out right away. I hope you enjoyed hearing me talk about all the decks I'll be trying out immediately. All of the codes will be down in the comments. I'll be playing these as soon as it goes live, and I'll start uploading twice daily for the next week as the game launches and I start trying out all of this and exploring the new meta. I hope you've enjoyed hearing me talk about Festival of Legends before the launch, and I hope you enjoy seeing me play it a few hours from now once I finally get to start playing and uploading footage for the expansion. I've been rather incoherent. If you liked the video, like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff really does help the channel grow, and I'll see you in the next one.